meeting number 85 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I will start with a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Just so you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee.
See a full room here, and of course, as Mr. McGregor said, there's the star of the show, which is the Minister of Agriculture. So it's great to have you here, Minister McCauley. I know we're going to talk about Supplements B, but we generally have a wide scope, so I'm sure you'll get a wide-ranging amount of questions, and of course, officials will stick around for the second hour. I want to start, colleagues, by recognizing that Minister McCauley actually celebrated 35 years of parliamentary service last week, and that is significant because the chair let's a round of applause. Yep. It's significant, and look, I know that will be a brief reprieve, Minister, before you get some tough questions. But it's significant because the guy that sits in the chair wasn't even born when you started your parliamentary career. So that's that is significant. But thank you, Minister, for your service to Canada and indeed to the good people of Cardigan, which we had the opportunity to visit this summer. So, colleagues, pursuant to Standing Order 81.5, the committee is commencing its consideration of Supplementary Estimates B, 2023-2024, votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food referred to the committee on Thursday, November 9th, 2023. Of course, we've already welcomed the Honourable Minister, but I'd also like to welcome his officials who are here to support him today from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Deputy Minister Stephanie Beck. Welcome to the committee, Deputy Minister, and from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Dr. Harpreet Kochhar, who is the President. Welcome, sir. Great to have you here. Thank you for your collective service on behalf of Canadians. So, Minister McCauley, you have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks. I have a little bit of leniency either way, but then we'll get into questions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be back as Minister of Agriculture at this meeting, seeing some of the old faces, so that's good. And to work continually for farmers. I'm certainly pleased to be here with Stephanie Beck and President of CFIA. I understand the committee has a number of studies and works underway, so we'll be happy to take your questions on these important subjects, but I'd like to quickly update you on the ongoings at Agriculture Canada. The estimates you have before you total more than $355 million. The vast majority of these estimates will help Canadian dairy, poultry and egg producers and processors with the impact of CUSMA on their businesses. This includes the beginning of a new Dairy Innovation and Investment Fund, which I announced back in September, to help the dairy producers and processors to find market for solid non-fats. With this program, we have fully delivered on the commitment to a full and fair compensation for the impact of the recent trade agreements for Canadian dairy, poultry, and egg producers and processors. Mr. Chair, there's a total federal investment of up to $4.8 billion to support our hard-working producers and processors, and we will continue to support our supply management program. The estimates also deliver on a commitment for new funding on the On-Farm Climate Action Fund. Since it was launched last year, the fund made almost $10 million available to help thousands of farmers across Canada to take real action on their farms. This includes rotational grazing practices, cover cropping, and nitrogen management. The estimates also support our first ever Agri-Food trade office in Manila. We will open the new office soon to help our sector maximize their sales in the Indo-Pacific area. A few weeks ago, I led an industry trade mission to the region, and I can tell you that demands for our products are growing in leaps and bounds. For example, in Vietnam, our beef exports have doubled over the last couple of years. Finally, Mr. Chair, the estimates support over $10 million for upgrades to our research laboratories across the country. They are so vital to a sustainable sector that can feed the world. Over the past couple of years, Canadian farmers have faced extreme weather, from drought, wildfires, to floods, to extreme cold. We're helping them build their resilience to climate change and profit from the new green technologies. Under the Fall Economic Statement, we will extend the Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit to include electricity and heat from waste biomass. That includes agricultural byproducts such as corn, stubble, and manure. The Fall Economic Statement also includes a new underused housing tax exemption for residential properties held as a place of residence for lodging of employees. We continue to improve the temporary foreign worker program to help farmers get the workers they need when they need them. And why we announced the recognized employer pilot to help address these labor shortages. Finally, we continue to work for affordable food for Canadians. We want to ensure that Canada has the right conditions for all parts of the food supply chain to prosper while ensuring affordable prices for Canadians. That's why we're supporting the industry-led grocery code of conduct for the Canadian grocery sector. The goal is to make the value chain more predictable and transparent for the benefit of everyone. I would add that we have met with the top 5 major grocery chains to ensure they have a plan to stabilize food prices for Canadians while ensuring that the costs are not passed on to farmers and producers. I understand that your committee will be inviting some of these folks in the coming weeks, and I certainly appreciate you doing that. Finally, Mr. Chair, I will continue to work to help producers and processors while supporting a more profitable, sustainable, and competitive Canadian agriculture and food sector. Now, I would be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister McCauley, for the update and for being here today. So we will turn to questions. Colleagues, remember, the time is yours, but I want to make sure I'm able to hear the question and be able to hear a reasonable response in terms of the timeline. So, Mr. Barlow, over to you for up to 6 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister. Minister, one of your first orders of business when you were reappointed to this file was to cut agri-recovery by 33% for Western Canadian provinces. Agri-recovery is supposed to be demand-driven. Why would the decision to cut this important financial relief to Western Canadian ranchers?
Thank you very much. Of course, when the business risk management programs, Mr. Chair, are so vitally important. And as my honourable colleague is well aware, with these programs, your government cut them substantially, and we invested $200 million more into the programs to make sure that situations that develop, as they have over the last few years, we're able to help farmers. Of course, in the end, when you have programs in government to help farmers during disaster, but in the end, being a farmer myself, I'm well aware that the farmer ends up paying a substantial part of it. But what we want to be sure is we have programs in place in order to help farmers get back on their feet. It must be devastating to see, like we went through Fiona and PEI. It was devastating, without a doubt, but it wasn't during the crop season, so. But it did affect, and
thanks,
the
Minister.
next year of the crop season. So what we have to do is have programs.
It's my time, Minister. It's my time.
In order to address.
So you did cut agri-recovery by 33%. You say it's a vitally important program, but you did cut that program by 33%, which was important for ranchers, as you admit. Normally, that program is announced. The provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta specifically, put in their request for agri-recovery funding in July. Normally, that announcement would come out in September. It was early November when finally, at the 11th hour, the federal government came up with a portion of what would be expected. Why such a significant delay in the announcement of agri-recovery program?
No, my honourable colleague is a friend of mine, but actually we did not cut agri-recovery. And in fact, what we had to make sure is to invest more into the business risk management programs, as I said. And of course, yes, we received applications for agri-recovery from the provinces, my honourable colleague has indicated, and they're vitally important programs. But as I said previously, when we allocated $99.2 million in funds, and to Alberta, $42.7 million to BC, and over $77 million to Saskatchewan. And that's a big help. But being a farmer myself, I'm well aware that possibly we need to take a look at these programs, see if we can provide even better service to the agricultural sector.
Well, thanks,
because
I'm glad,
when you go through a disaster,
I'm glad you said that we need to take.
Minister, we better let.
Minister,
let's say fires.
I'm glad you said that we should take a second look at these programs and maybe help them make sure they serve better. So, your government right now is forcing a moisture map on the provinces that does not cover nearly the number of ranchers who should be covered. So, if you are now saying you're willing to review these programs, are you willing to commit to work with the provinces to ensure that they use an accurate moisture map to ensure that all ranchers who suffered the drought and are eligible for assistance receive that assistance they need through agri-recovery?
Again, I don't want to have a dispute with my honourable friend, but the fact is we're working with the provinces in order to establish a map. I think that would be a better term to use in this program. What you have to do in a situation like this, and all the situations involved with farm loss, is to deal with the provinces and territories and the agricultural sector itself, the farmer itself, to make sure that the program comes from the bottom up. That's what we have done, and that's what we're going to continue to do, to make sure that we provide as much help as we can when problems hit the agricultural sector. Well, and Minister, there's no question about it. We had enough of disasters to understand how vitally important
Minister, if you're saying that the program should come from the ground up, every single rancher in Western Canada, including the premiers, disagree with the map that your government has provided them. The ministers in those the agriculture ministers in those provinces are saying you're forcing a map on them that is completely inaccurate. But you're saying that this should come from the ground up. I completely agree. So you should listen to the ranchers and listen to the agriculture ministers in those provinces. But Minister, your primary responsibility in your role is to be a voice of Canadian agriculture. You voted against C-234 in the House on, well, when you realized what the bill actually was, you kind of flip-flopped on your support and then didn't support it. Do you still stand by your, we have every single commodity group, an agriculture group, and farm group supporting Bill C-234, and yet you are continuing to vote against it. Do you still stand by your position that Canadian farmers support the Liberal carbon tax?
I'm certainly sure that my honourable colleague would never want to leave the committee with a misunderstanding. He knows very well that we're discussing with the provinces and territories on a moisture map, and we will continue to do so. As Minister of Agriculture, whatever sector it is, if it's climate change, anything else, I want to deal with the farm sector, and we have. And of course, as my honourable colleague is well aware, about 97% of the fuel sector is exempt from tax on pollution.
Minister, I only have.
But the fact is,
I only have 15 seconds left.
If you ask the question, my good friend, I have to be able to answer it. The fact is, there are so many factors involved in what takes place.
So, if you wouldn't mind, as my last couple seconds here, would you table the document with this committee that shows that 97% of carbon taxes are exempt on farm? I'd love to see that data.
Mr. Barlow, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Minister.
much.
We'll turn to Mr. McDonald. Over to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the Minister for being here. Obviously, Minister, I'm new to this, relatively new to this committee, but there's a lot of regional issues facing provinces and the country as a whole. And I know it's a strain sometimes to ensure that everyone from coast to coast to coast is satisfied with all the decisions being made at the federal level. But Minister, I follow you obviously on social media, and you've been across the country at least once, maybe even twice. And you're talking to farmers, you're talking to ranchers, processors. I want to know, Minister, what have you been working with the provinces to tackle these problems tackle some problems that some of these farmers and ranchers are having in their individual provinces?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your question. And of course, when you become minister, I believe of anything, the appropriate thing to do is travel across the country and make sure that you're talking with the sector that you're involved with. And without a question, in agriculture, I've been right across the country a few times, and I've met with most of the ministers across the country, whatever stripe it might be. And when you meet them, they're all interested in doing one thing, helping the agricultural sector. And what I'm interested in doing is making sure that we work together to put programs in place. Now, I could give you a list of what we did with programs and what we did on the climate action program on these types of things. But these are all done with provinces, and of course, the announcements we make on these types of things basically have a climate component to it, but to make sure that the provinces are very satisfied too. Sometimes we deal with the provinces and like the Canola Council itself. They all are involved in, like in Manitoba, we made an announcement a couple of weeks ago. I think it was around. It ended up at 9.2 for the federal government, but about $17 million in total when you put all this together. And that's done, of course, to make sure that we're able to do many things, perhaps produce a better quality seed, a seed that we're growing in a drought situation or whatever. So that, and of course, to produce seed that produces a bigger crop. Being a farmer myself, the number one thing a farmer has to do is produce the crop. If you don't produce a good crop, it's pretty difficult to make a profit. So that's a very important thing. But also all the other factors come into play too. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I just want to touch on, because I was in provincial politics, as you're aware, and I always, the Agri-Recovery was always, and tell me if this is correct, was always negotiated and discussed with each provincial partner. Is that still what happens?
I can assure you that it is, and sometimes it's not all that easy, but when you have 10 ministers and 13 from the provinces and territories, what we do is sit down and iron out, in fact, what type of a program that can be put in place. And I've been at a number of these meetings, and that, in my view, that's the way it should be done. Sometimes it's not all that simple, but in the end, everybody. But there's different problems in different areas of the country. Sometimes things don't fit that well in one place, and they do in another. And putting a program for the nation together sometimes can be a problem. But in general, that's what we do.
Also, Minister, I know you and I, when I was first elected, before I had my seat warm in Parliament, that we were dealing with potato wart. And it was certainly an experience for me. But I just want to ask you, where are we at with potato wart and basically the communication between the PEI Potato Board and the Government of Canada?
Well, being a seed potato grower myself from Prince Edward Island, I'm well aware of the devastation that. I remember when PBYN hit, I had a warehouse full of potatoes. It lost three quarters of the price overnight. Without a question, the potato wart is devastating. But where we are at the moment, and went through a lot of different issues, of course, the market was closed in the U.S. It had to be. The market was closed off of PEI because, of course, we had to make sure that the wart did not spread. But we were able to work a deal with the U.S. and the rest of Canada to be able to wash and sprout nip the potatoes, which is vitally important. But on the seed export side, there was some concern and a little bit of annoyance, I guess you could say. But I have to say, and the plug for CFIA, they came to the province, visited farms, and explained the situation and how important potato producers, big business across Canada, but big business in Prince Edward Island too, $1 million businesses. And they understand the importance of the American market being kept open. So we have to deal with the Americans. We have to deal with the provinces across the country. And, of course, that's not all that difficult. I dealt with the National Potato Council yesterday. They just want to help. And I can assure you that's what the seed potato growers in Prince Edward Island want to do. But we want to create a situation that we're able to move our valuable seed to other parts of the world. And we will.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister and Mr. MacDonald. Now we have Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here this morning. Thank you, Ms. Beck, and thank you, Mr. Kochar, for being here. Mr. Macaulay, Produce farmers rang a bell last year. They had a record rainfall. About 60% of crops were destroyed. It's very difficult. We have been calling for help for months. The provincial government offered interest-free loans, but the federal government has not reacted yet. The Quebec government reiterated its announcement recently, and they talked about the Agri-Recovery program. I wonder what your Agri-Recovery, rather.
Received the papers from Quebec, and we're evaluating them, and of course we will do as quickly as possible. Sometimes it's felt that it's not fast enough, but I have to admit...
Donc, je comprends que vous répondez oui, là.
So you're saying yes, even though the answer has not been official yet.
Well, I certainly expect when you have devastation, that's what the programs are in place for, and we want to make sure that happens. And I want to tell you that I met with the minister in Quebec, Mr. Lamontagne, who has been very helpful on many files. But also, there's such a problem in Quebec in particular and some other parts of the country where you have a drought in one area and then too much rain in another and a good crop in another, and that's all in the same zone, which makes it difficult for the Agri-Recovery program. It's certainly not that the federal government or the provincial government or the territories are not providing the funding. I'm not talking about your specific application, but the fact is overall, by speaking with the Minister Lamontagne and the situation in Quebec and other areas, that we have so many variations that's why I probably...
Je m'excuse de vous couper, mais...
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we don't have much time. I understand what you're saying. I'm aware of all that, the variations. In Abitibi-Témiscamingue, they're having droughts. What's important is for the federal government to react quickly to Quebec's requests. And so what I'm hearing now is that you're saying yes. We also asked for some funds immediately because our businesses need money. And the Quebec government offered interest-free loans. This jurisdiction is shared. It's not just provincial. So the federal government also has a responsibility. What is the federal government going to do?
I'm fully aware of the program. In fact, the advance payment program is a program that I used as a farmer in Prince Edward Island. And you're no doubt talking about the $350,000 limit that it was at, or is at. And of course, that's advantageous to the farmer. And I have to say I like that, without any question, but it's up to the Minister of Finance to decide where that stays.
Je m'excuse, monsieur. Encore, dans ce cas-ci...
Sorry to cut you off again. I'm talking about a program, an immediate program. Quebec provided new funds. We're talking about an ad hoc program. Will you be offering more funds in order for the farmers to have access to money? I'm talking about new funds, not existing programs, because we're going to have to start thinking outside of the box. Risk management programs don't work anymore. I think you're aware of that. We're going to have to look at that more. But there has been a program that was in place during COVID. That was helpful. It doesn't cost much to the federal government. And now the finance minister is telling us no. I want to know if you're putting pressure for us to receive such funds. Can you tell farmers that you were going to let them breathe a little bit financially?
Well, of course, we have to use the existing programs that are in place. That's certainly what we have to do. And of course, this agri-insurance,
Mais je parle pas des...
we're trying to
Je vous parle du compte d'urgence, monsieur Macaulay.
I'm talking about emergency funds. The emergency funds for businesses during COVID. We had a one-year reimbursement period. Inaudible. Point of order. I understand that we're talking about Credit B, and my colleague will understand that that has nothing to do with Credit B. That is the finance minister's and small businesses jurisdiction. I understand, but we do have an opportunity here to ask certain questions. But Mr. Perron, if the minister has answered the question. Please target your questions to the supplementary estimates and other measures. We don't have the minister here very often, and we are talking about a financial situation. I would like to know that certain things, if we're not going to get an answer, I'll ask something else. Inaudible.
Quite simply, you have to ask somebody else.
Minister,
because it's finance.
For the benefit of our translators here, we can't have 4 people talking at one time. So I've stopped the clock. You have about a minute and a half left, Mr. Parent. Minister, when he's asking the question, I know you'll want to jump in because you want to engage, but we have to be fair to our good translators and make sure that they don't. And I know, Mr. Parent, you want to jump in too. I know there'll be a bit of back and forth, but we can't have people talking over each other. So you have 90 seconds left. Over to you. And Minister, let him finish, and then I know you'll have the answer. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you don't necessarily have an answer this morning, but I am asking you formally, publicly, the following question. Our producers need the minister to work for them and to acquire liquid assets. It's very important, and this is an emergency situation. With regards to the local infrastructure emergency fund, I'd like you to tell us what happened. In previous studies, witnesses told us there wasn't enough money. Would it be possible to have more sources of investment? We launched a program to allocate a bit more than $15,000. And in my riding, many producers sent me letters saying that businesses made requests in good faith, and the answer they got was that there wasn't enough money and the rules of the program have changed. So instead of being between $15,000 and $50,000, or rather between $15,000 and $20,000, it would now be $15,000 to $50,000, and only for rural communities. So there are farmers, or rather in agriculture, we need a lot of investments. Will you be asking for more money for the program? I'm sorry, you have an answer to answer briefly, Mr. Macaulay?
On your previous question, it's under the Minister of Finance. And of course, when I ask for more money, I'm noted for asking for money all the time.
Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, Monsieur McGregor pour 6 minutes. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, Minister Macaulay. Good to see you here. I also want to ask about the Agri-Recovery Fund. So specifically for my province of British Columbia, large parts of the interior have been experiencing drought. My own region of Vancouver Island in the Cowichan Valley, the price of feed went up, and a lot of farmers who were relying on forage crops, they essentially couldn't water. So it caused a lot of trouble throughout my province. Now, your ministry received a message from the BC ministry on July the 27th. You released a news release on August 21st designating the regions, the different provinces that you were working on joint agri-recovery assessments. And then it wasn't until October the 18th that a $219 million announcement came. So my question to you, Minister, I understand you do have agreements with the provinces with agri-recovery, but I don't want you using provincial governments as a crutch or an excuse. I want to know, given the fact that climate change is a reality, that this is now a feature, not an exception, that these problems are going to get worse, how are you going to take more of a leadership role in future years to make sure that this program is more nimble and responsive? Because when I look at this timeline, you get a message in July and then a payment coming out in October. When I'm speaking to farmers, that's not a very fast timeline when they're dealing with that kind of a financial crunch.
Mr. McGregor, I certainly appreciate your question, and sometimes, as I said, it would be good to look at some of these programs. But of course, what we have to do as a government is the province has to tabulate all the difficulties, all the things that qualify for the program. Then they send it to Ottawa, and we have to follow the criteria that's established with the provinces and territories. we don't have the flexibility to do what we want either. It's decided at a federal provincial conference as to how these programs would work, and we must follow it too. So that's what we do. But I have to say, Alistair, that I have a great rapport with your Minister of Agriculture, and I've talked to her a number of times. And just to highlight, I called her one day, I thought she was going to a fire, and instead of that she was going to a flood, which pretty much explains what a situation we are in the world.
I just need to get to other questions. So when I look at the mandate letter that was given to your predecessor, the Honourable Mary Claude Bibeau, it's now 2 years old. And I compare that with what other countries are doing. I think there's a decided lack of ambition in that document, and I don't think it's commensurate with our agricultural place in the world. So let me cite 2 examples, Minister. Australia has a national soil strategy. Denmark has developed an organic policy framework where they have a goal of making sure that 60% of all food in public kitchens is organic. So, these are countries which are leading the way. And, I've talked to the organic sector. I went to the Organic BC conference in Penticton a couple of weeks ago. You look at the benefits of less reliance on expensive inputs, greater resilience in the face of climate change, higher profit margins for their farmers. Where is your ambition in trying to match what other countries are doing when it comes to making our farmers less reliant on inputs, on making sure that we have some kind of a national soil strategy so that we're really unleashing the potential it has in helping our farmers deal with climate change?
I appreciate the question, and of course, the health of soil is extremely important. Being a farmer, I'm well aware. If you don't have the proper soil, and as a farmer, if you don't take care of it, it's of course, you have a financial problem. Since 2021, we have announced $1.5 billion to help farmers adapt practices and technologies that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve soil health. And of course, with that, we have hired more scientists, and it's so vitally important that we deal with, of course, the countries that we're not beyond learning from other countries too, of course. If examples that will help improve the conservation of the soil, capture emissions, any of this, we're very interested in as a government, and I know you are too. And we're wide open to it. There's an end to the financial input, of course, by government. There's always.
I just respectfully interrupt you, Minister. I was on the convention floor in Penticton speaking with organic farmers from all across BC. And yes, you've got the funding announcements, but I think they're looking for something more that's commensurate with their growing importance, not only in our market, but also international markets. And you've got funding, but we don't see like a national plan to really build their sector up. That's what they're looking for. I mean, they respect farmers from all walks of life, but they simply want that respect afforded to them that's commensurate with their place in not only the domestic market, but also the growing importance in the international market. And when you look at a small country like Denmark, the fact that it's got such an ambitious policy goal, where is Canada in matching that kind of ambition?
Well, of course, you're noted aware we established a working group with the sector, and I think if you check with the sector previously when I was here, establishing the standards for the sector, we worked very hard to put that in place. I have dealt with this sector previously and will be more than pleased to deal with them again. I'm fully aware that we export about half of what we produce in the organic sector, but we also import a lot of organic products, so of course the market is wide open. But when you look at agriculture and farming in particular, farming and ranching totally, the opportunities are endless. When you look at biofuels, no matter where you look, it looks to me like the future is great, and that's good to hear as a farmer, and I always was a farmer. I think being a farmer, you always are a farmer, but we have to make sure we're able to capture these, and any extra input that you have, I'm wide open to hear, because we want to learn from other countries too. Farmers want to learn. That's why we created the Living Labs, which you know all about, I'm sure. These are so important, so you get the example of what takes place. Farmers are very resilient. They know. They're innovators. The organic sector, or I was not an organic farmer, but I'm well aware of what they do and fully support them and want to support them because the opportunities are basically endless.
We'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor and Minister. We'll now turn to Ms. Rood for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Minister, you keep saying you're a potato farmer. I come from a potato farm, and we know we love our potatoes. But, Minister, you would know then that potatoes come in plastic bags. And right now, there is a P2 plastics ban by your government that wants to eliminate the use of plastics in all produce. But the Supreme Court has struck down the plastics ban that this government's already tried to put in place. So I'm wondering, are you prepared to back down on this proposed plastics ban for the produce sector?
Of course, I'm not big on backing down on anything unless it's wrong. But what we have to do, I know what happened, and of course, we're looking at this situation, evaluating what path the government will take as a whole. It's not wholly my decision as to how we deal with this issue, but there are many issues in the plastic sector. Do we have the packages to deal with down the road? All of this we're dealing with as the government, and we have to make sure that we have goals set, and you have to set goals if you want to get anywhere in dealing with climate change or anything else in life. And we have a goal to deal with plastics too.
Thank you, Minister, but I would suggest that they need to be realistic goals, and through you, Chair, Minister, I'm not sure if you're aware, but more than 2/3 of all produce that we consume in this country is imported. So this plastics ban will have a dramatic effect on the fresh supply of fruit and vegetables, and it impacts the greatest, our largest trading partner, which is the U.S. So this is a potential food security issue that's being created because of your government's own policies. So I'm just curious if you've actually engaged with our largest trading partner, the U.S., on this, and do you not think that this would be a trade issue with other countries?
Thank you very much. And yes, I have discussed it with the American ambassador. And of course, no matter what you do in life, there's concerns about when you put programs in place. But when you look at what's taking place in our waters around the world and the problem with plastic, I think you would agree that we have to make an approach or make a move in order to clean this up. And that's in fact what we want to do, to make sure that on this planet we have a place to live, that the fish have a place to live, and that's in fact what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Minister, but I would argue, through you, Chair, that Canadians need to eat. While we all care about the fish and we care about the environment, we all need to eat. And Minister, the single-use packaging ban will stop perishables and limit the exports into Canada. And I would suggest that perhaps last week when the Prime Minister was in California and he met with produce growers, that the Americans and Canadians brought this issue up to the Prime Minister. We are a global supply chain in this country, Minister. So as of right now, there is no large-scale option or alternative to plastic packaging. So given that our food supply chain is global, what are you going to do to protect fruit and vegetable growers' ability to get their product to market without actually increasing food costs, which could be as dramatic as 25 or 30% even? And Canadians are struggling right now to afford groceries. So an extra 30% on produce and fresh food would be catastrophic to a lot of Canadians' ability to buy food.
I, of course, will make sure, I fully agree that we do not want to do anything that's going to increase the price of food. And of course, as I said, this, I think my honourable colleague would agree that we need to deal with the plastic issue. It's 3 years or 3.5 years out. We have to make sure we set targets and make sure that we meet them, unless there's decisions made to change it. But if you do not set targets, you never meet your requirement. And what we want to do as a government is make sure that we deal with the plastic issue. I think everybody would agree that it was great, but it's become a big issue. But certainly not to make sure that we pass anything down that will hurt the farmer, or to make sure that we do not add the price to food. There are other ways in order to package.
To dramatically increase the price of food. And you are going to pass this down to the farmer. Packaging plays an absolutely critical role in fresh produce. It protects produce during transportation, consumer handling, and it reduces food waste. And we haven't even talked about how much food waste this plastic ban would actually make in this country. Plastic packaging allows for a wide range of products from across Canada and the world to travel to remote communities without significant food waste. And again, there is no commercially viable alternative, and we are a global supply chain. So until the rest of the world gets on board with this plastics ban, we are going to starve Canadians when 2/3 of our produce comes in to this country, and we can't grow 2/3 of our produce.
We'll have to leave it at that, Ms. Root.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we'll go to Ms. Taylor-Roy online for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister McCauley, for being here this morning. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I'm sure in your 35 years of service you've gone through many of this, but I just was reflecting as I was hearing some of these questions that one member was saying we're not ambitious enough and we need to do more change, and another member was saying we can't change because this will cripple our industry. But change is happening. To some extent, it's being forced on us, and fighting pollution and greenhouse gases is so important to the future of our country and the industry. So I know we've faced tough times with recent natural disasters, wildfires to floods, and we all know that climate change plays a part in making these events more severe. So I was wondering, Minister McCauley, can you tell us how the government has been supporting farmers in the face of natural disasters and climate change?
Thank you very much. And of course, farmers are very concerned about climate change. They're on the front line on this issue, and they mostly take the blunt of it too, of course. That's why it's so important that we work with provincial governments right across, provincial and territorial governments right across the country, and that we establish programs that will help them deal with so many different issues. Like 2 weeks ago, I was in Winnipeg, and we announced a $9.2 million to the canola cluster, and with the province and the canola cluster, I believe it ended up to be around $16 or $17 million. This was, of course, to deal with the climate change issue. And also, these programs are put in place, let's say, to develop new seeds, to capture carbon. There are so many things that are involved in the programs that we announce. But in all programs, there's always a climate part to the program that we announce. And, of course, farmers want us to do that. They do not. They understand when you have winds of over 200 kilometers an hour. I give you an example in PEI. It near blew us off of the map. Over 200 kilometers an hour. Blew down dairy barns. You talk about the price of food. There's so many issues on the price of food with the Russian invasion. But if you blow down dairy barns and kill the dairy cattle that are in the barns and these things, of course, it's important that governments deal with this issue. And I can assure you on PEI, people are fully aware of how important these programs are. But no matter what province, whether it's British Columbia or Newfoundland or wherever we work with provincial governments or in the north who are suffering more on the climate change issue than the rest of the country, it's so vitally important that we have everybody involved. And why I use the Winnipeg announcement is because it involves the provincial, the federal, and the Canola Council itself. So it's so vitally important that we continue on these issues. But I'd also like to say, when I was minister previously, we established the Living Labs issue, which I was very big on. Excuse me. And Living Labs is just an opportunity for the scientists, the farmers, and the industry itself to work together in order to just see what farmers, when they see somebody, quite simply, if there's a new program that can help the climate and save money, farmers are going to accept that. We know that we have to deal with this issue. And I was just outside of Calgary, and crop rotation, my heaven, pasture rotation, I mean, the way that's handled, it was interesting being a farmer. I think this rancher had about 11 different crops in the one field. And he was going to be able to, right down to turnips at the bottom. And they were going to be able to pasture that land for about 10 plus months of the year. So this is the type of thing that's probably not that overly expensive, but working together, we can establish. And of course, the rotational pasture program means that you have to put a mechanism in place. Ranchers, a lot of cattle, and you have to be able to have automatic systems in place so they can shift. So these kind of things, as I say, being a farmer, are pretty interesting to me. I never did it, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
amazing.
and it's interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate the work the government is doing to support the farmers. I know we've had many here in committee who have talked about the 4R program and what it's doing. And, you know, we need to, they're on the front line, as you said, and I'm proud that we're supporting them as they're trying to make these changes and look at things like substitutes for plastic bags, or how to heat and dry or dry crops and dry grain and heat and cool barns as well. So thank you very much for your work on this, Minister McCauley.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor-Roy, and thank you, Minister. Yep, we'll turn it over to Monsieur Parent pour pas 5 minutes, 2 minutes.
Mr. Perron, 5 minutes? No, I'm sorry, 2.5 minutes. 2 minutes and a half. I will be asking brief questions, brief answers, please. With your last answer, I do appreciate that you answered at the end of what you said, and that you said that you are asking for more money. I appreciate that you're putting pressure on them. In your opening remarks, you talked about supply management, compensation, and so on. As you know, C-282 was approved by your predecessor, who is now at the Senate. I understand that you also approve it, and it is part of the government's policy to make sure that there are no gaps in supply management and for C-282 to be adopted as quickly as possible.
I can only agree that we want it adopted as soon as possible.
Magnifique.
Because we support the program.
Excellent. Sur le code de
Fantastic. So we agree as well with regards to the code of conduct. It is urgent for us to adopt a measure on that. And I understand that you are continuing Ms. Bibeau's work with Mr. Lamontagne for that to be adopted as quickly as possible. Is that correct?
And a pleasure. Mr. Lamontagne has been on the issue much longer than I have, and he's able to inform me of previous how the thing went on for the last over 2 years. But we've made a lot of progress we haven't made it. The industry itself. The code is an industry-led event, which is so vitally important to say, and that's what we want.
Merci.
And hopefully it'll be announced very shortly.
Vous interromps encore. Désolé.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to talk about the excise tax. There was a complaint made by Australia. The government had to reconsider the tax on wine, and there was an exemption for alcohol made from honey products, and we are hoping for the same exemption for a different kind of alcohol. Can we have the same kind of exemption in coming months?
We're quite successful in the dairy sector, and we will work very hard to make sure we're successful in the wine sector, a very important industry in the country.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Perron. I'm sorry, your time is up. Now on to Mr. McGregor for 2 minutes and a half.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, in your opening remarks, you had made mention of the fact that your government did meet with the grocery CEOs. Last week, the CEO of Metro, Eric Laflèche, was interviewed in Quebec media, and he openly admitted that his meeting with Minister Champagne had zero impact on food prices. Zero impact. And, you know, we live in a country where 80% of our grocery market is dominated by 5 players. You know, I'm just wondering from your perspective, is not a small part of you a bit frustrated that these CEOs seem to be thumbing their nose at your government, thumbing their nose at the Canadian public? And why are we just showing so much corporate deference when so many Canadians for over 20 months now have been suffering from out-of-control food price inflation? You've seen the figures at Canadian food banks, and for that figure to exist in a country that counts itself as one of the big agricultural powerhouses in Canada is a shameful record on us. And so I'm just wondering, the fact that you have a CEO coming out and saying that that meeting did nothing, is not a small part of you a little bit angry that a stern talking to didn't work? And what more are you going to be doing to bring the CEOs to heel?
If you're going to get angry in this business, you'd be angry all the time. And that simply you cannot be, I tell you that. I doubt if a meeting would do much on the price, but on the price of food, not to be inconsiderate on my answer. But the fact is, yes, well, what I hope and expect and think will happen is that a grocery code will be released. There is some dispute as to who will join it and who will not join it. It's important to realize that it's industry-led, it's not government-led, and the provinces have indicated. I met with my provincial counterparts on this issue, and the provinces are agreeable to help with the funding and put an adjudicator in place. What we want to do is, what we hope will happen is meeting with all groups on the supply chain, that this code of conduct for groceries is put out, and no doubt will be added upon, and if certain groups do not join it, possibly there'll be some pressure on them, because if you do not join it, there's a reason why you would not join it. I would expect the public would be quite interested in that. So, you know, it's important that we meet with these 5, but of course, it's a bill of 56 that will give us more chance to expand the grocery retailers. There's things that we're working at in government. Sometimes I get my numbers mixed up, but the truth is, what we want to do is make sure that we expand the retail end of it, because it looks like probably there are 5 majors and a few smaller ones, but we need more competition in that sector.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Minister. In fact, we'll be calling those CEOs before our committee in the days ahead. So, Mr. McGregor, you'll have the ability to ask those questions alongside all of us. Maintenant, nous avons Monsieur Lehoux pour 5 minutes.
Now, Mr. Lehoux for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here this morning. Quick question and a brief answer, please. You're likely aware that on December 22nd, in 3 weeks, the biggest pork slaughterhouse in Quebec will be closed. Nearly 1,000 jobs will be lost in my riding. That was a very important issue because, as you know, we are an export market for pork and hogs, especially with China. You talked about an office in the Philippines opening up. I wonder when they will open. It's important for us to open up new markets, especially internationally. Will the office in the Philippines open in the next weeks, months, or is it already open?
The plant closing hurts, without a question, but it's an industry decision, but it hurts. I understand quite clearly, whether you're in politics or not, seeing something like that happen hurts. But looking at the demand for meat and protein, and looking what's taking place around the world, I'm very optimistic that there'll be a much bigger demand for all our products. I just want to say this, and in Manila, and of course we've been there previously, but why we have that office open there is to make sure that area of the world means we're not just dropping in, we're there to stay. Thank you.
Ma question est simple, Monsieur le Ministre, à quel moment il ouvre ce bureau-là?
My question is simple. When will that office open? And of course, it is a shame when jobs are lost. I'd like an answer to my first question and ask you a second question now. the closure of this processing plant is because of the immigration minister. I have been elected for 4 years, and I have been fighting on this for years. Will you be collaborating with the immigration minister? We want to. There are businesses that are closing because there are delays with regards to temporary foreign workers.
Temporary foreign workers are always a big issue, and of course it's an issue that I dealt with all my political life because we can't open our fish plants without them. On the office in Manila, we hope to make an announcement very shortly. I do not want to give you a date because we have to be sure that it's going to happen when I say it's going to happen. I look at, as I said, being in that area, and what we're trying to do is to make sure they understand we're there. We're there for the long term. That's what the office is for. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Et je vais passer la parole, mais avant.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I will pass the mic to a colleague. But the issue that we have with temporary foreign workers is the following. The closure of the Olymel processing plant is because of that, but there are other businesses in the agri-food industry that will encounter many difficulties if we don't correct course with regards to temporary foreign workers.
I agree with and would take any input you have on temporary foreign workers because my colleague, I understand the importance full and well of how important this is. The only thing I want to do is make sure that none of your industries are not working because
Monsieur le ministre, outre comprendre l'importance et de l'action.
You understand, but what we want is for action to take place. My colleague, please.
Mr. Minister, how many organizations have you heard from that are not in favor of Bill 234? How many farm organizations have come to you to actually ask it be implemented?
I think most of the sectors understand quite clearly that we have to deal with the climate issue.
Just a number. How many organizations have been in favor?
I haven't tabulated who talked to me in favor or against, but I do know that talking to the sectors...
Was there any farm organizations in favor of Bill 234?
Well, I talk with people right across the country, my friend, and the fact is they're very concerned about the environment. They're also very concerned. You'll have to let me answer for a minute. I mean, if you're going to just continually ask me questions and cut me off, I can't answer you. The fact of the matter is farmers understand quite clearly that we have to deal with this issue. Now, there might be things that everybody would like to get an exemption on this and an exemption on that. There's a lot of exemptions on the fuels for farms. But the fact is, we have to deal with the climate issue, and we are. And I can tell you that right across the country, they fully understand that. If that's the answer that you want, I hope it is.
Mr. Steinley, you've got just a little bit more time, 10, 15 seconds, and then a quick response from the minister.
Yeah, I'll just say I understand that farmers are aware of what they need to do to be good stewards of the land. And I'm proud to be from Saskatchewan. We have zero till, we have rotational grazing, we have crop rotation, and we've done that all with zero government programs. It was farmers' innovation. So I'd ask that you do listen to our farmers, because taking $1 billion out of their pocket so they can't innovate is going to decimate the industry.
From what I've seen across Western Canada, they are certainly innovating, and they're innovating right across the country. And without any question, farmers are innovators, ranchers are innovators. They have to be in order to stay in existence. And I can assure you, my honourable colleague, that this government will do everything to help them in every way possible to make sure they succeed, because we need their meat. We need their grains. We need all these products. The world is wide open to our products, and we want to ship them, and we will.
Finalement, nous avons Monsieur Lewis.
Now, Mr. Lewis, for the last question of the third round. Well, it's not a third round; it's a turn.
So am I. That's why I grabbed the in. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I appreciate your time and your information. In my riding in Kitchener-Conestoga, our dairy farmers are vital to our community and across Canada. Dairy farmers are a key driver to our economy. I think there's about 10,000 farms, 500 dairy processing plants, about $17 billion in sales, and about 70,000 jobs in Canada. So what I wanted to talk about was the Canadian Dairy Innovation Fund. which we announced in Budget 2023. So I'd like to speak to you about that investment innovation fund and ask how the government is supporting the industry with this innovation fund and supporting supply management sectors across the country.
Mr. Lewis, thank you very much. It's, of course, important to the sector. $333 million to help the industry purchase, install, and commission new equipment, software, and product lines, help remove outdated equipment. This is what we have to do is make sure that the plants are able to innovate and produce products, help train folks on new equipment, and there's so much more that we have to do. And of course, the products that they will produce with this product when they manufacture, that's why we have more scientists, that's why we have more people evaluating what can take place. My understanding is you can make many, many things with these products. So that's what we want to do. And the product is there. The financing is there to help. Of course, small part of it. The government is there. The industry itself is investing a large amount of dollars because they understand, hopefully they understand that's a profit in this. And also they're using a product it's a world problem, in fact, this non-fat issue. And what we want to make sure is that we're on the cutting edge of that, and I think we are.
Thank you for that. My understanding is that funding will be allocated by region. I believe Ontario is getting $127 million in investment. Can you explain how this will be delivered, how the funding will be delivered?
Well, of course, like any program, Tim, that will take place with the Government of Canada, there has to be applications in place, and you have to meet the criteria. I don't have the total criteria right in front of me, but of course there's criteria that has to be met. And without a question, these plants will have the knowledge and ability to be able to put the programs together. It's vitally important that they do. When they apply for these programs, there's certain criteria they have to meet. If not, I'm going to hear from my honourable colleagues to the right that we didn't follow the criteria. They might mention that. So you have to be careful. You have to do it right.
I thank you for that. And I also understand, I believe it's going to be delivered by the Canadian Dairy Commission, I believe.
Yes. But of course, any federal dollars that are spent has to be, there's programs, and in these programs there's criteria to meet, and we have to make sure that's done. Thank you so much.
And if I could go to a broader topic, just talk about the importance of supply management to Canadians. It gives farmers the stability that they need. It's assuring that they get a fair price, and then also it adds stability to production control, pricing mechanisms, and import controls. So can you just talk about your support and our government's support for supply management in general?
Tim, I could talk about supply management for a long time. I milked cows in Prince Edward Island before you fellows hired me to do this job, and I have a great. It's a wonderful program, and when you go to other countries and you on agricultural meetings, and one of the questions they ask you is, how do we handle our surplus? I mean, this thing is under control. This thing is handled properly. There's a profit for the farmers. There's excellent products put in place. It works. And of course, you have to be very careful with other countries trying to import, and there are some coming in, but we paid up for that issue. But the fact is, I think it'll always continue that you'll find the governments want to intrude into our space in the supply management system. And it's up to governments to watch very carefully that we protect this sector, because it's one thing that has worked very well in this country for a long time, and we want to make sure that that continues. And I appreciate the question.
I thank you for your time, and I will see the rest of my time, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of the first hour. Minister, thank you. I see Mr. McGregor would take that 30 seconds, but I know I'm going to occupy that space, Mr. McGregor, for the 30 seconds to, on behalf of all of you, thank the Minister for being here today. Thank you, Minister, for your service to Canada and to farmers. And we'll look forward to sticking around with your officials to ask some further questions. So, colleagues, we'll briefly suspend for a few minutes to let the Minister out and to let the officials kind of get up to the front bench. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, colleagues. We'll suspend for 2 minutes. And we've got a lot of very good, hardworking civil servants in front of us. So let me, on behalf of all of you, start by saying thank you to them. Our Deputy Minister, Ms. Beck, is sticking around. Thank you for being here. We have Marie-Claude Gerard, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Management Branch. Welcome. And we also have Tom Rosser, who's no stranger to this committee, the ADM for Market and Industry Services Branch. Thank you to all the folks at AAFC. And from CFIA, we have, again, Dr. Harpreet Kocher, who is the president, sticking around. Thank you. And we also have Dr. Mary Jane Ireland, who I made a quote last time. You could just set up a cot in the corner because you've been in front of this committee. I think this is like the third or fourth time now, Ms. Ireland. Thank you for your service to Canadians, and thank you for your service to this committee for being here and being available. Colleagues, as you know, there's no formal remarks, openings. It's just an opportunity for us to engage with department staff. So we're just going to get right to it. I've got 6 minutes for the Conservatives. Mr. Barlow, do you want to start, or who's starting on your side? Okay, over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who will take that. Maybe Ms. Beck, you'll take this. And the Minister had mentioned it in my questions, as well as I think a couple of questions from colleagues, on the fact that he's willing to review the decision on agri-recovery, for example. And I have spoken personally with the agriculture ministers in the provinces who are frustrated, to say the least, on the discrepancy on the moisture maps that the federal government is saying, basically enforcing take it or leave it, to compare to what the provinces are wanting to work with, to ensure that every farmer or rancher that is eligible and certainly suffered through either drought conditions or flood conditions this summer.
Office, press 3. To listen to the menu.
Are we getting called to the principal's office?
Ms. Taylor-Roy, okay, she's on silent. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, no worries. So I'm just wondering, is this still is there an opportunity to review these maps, and who makes the decision on what map is being used on the federal government side?
Well, I think probably too late for this round for these particular events that happened over the past summer. But in fact, it's a negotiated agreement on which maps are used. We have our own analysis, of course, and we offer that to the provinces as something they can use. But they are also fully able to overlay, for instance, that did happen in one province, the maps that they find most appropriate because of what we've been talking about all morning, the discrepancies even from acre to acre in some cases.
I
Very
understand.
hard, of course, to be specific.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I understand that, Ms. Beck, but when you say it's a negotiation, it's very clear from my conversations with the agriculture ministers provincially that this was not a negotiation. This has been basically at the 11th hour, literally when in Alberta, the provincial agriculture minister was at the podium to make the announcement, gets a text saying, no, we're using this map, and this is the map you will be using. This doesn't seem to be the typical collegial negotiation that's been in the past. This was much more of a top-down measure, I guess. And so you said it's too late for this year. I gather that, but was there a difference this time around in terms of how this was negotiated, that it seems on the provincial side a much more contentious process than it has been in the past?
So I wasn't there for the previous round of negotiations, but what we were looking for was evidence of 50% of difference of damage caused. Perhaps in earlier years it wasn't that high, or it was higher, I'm not sure. The amount is never fixed, right? Obviously it varies depending on what's going on in the particular event. So it's not as though, and indeed I was in Saskatchewan recently too, and they said, we were being asked, why aren't you paying the exact same amount as last time around? It's a different event. Obviously the criteria are different, but the actual negotiating process would not be different. And my recollection is actually not what you're saying. In fact, I had some very specific conversations with my deputy minister colleagues about what is it you need, what do you want to use. We're completely flexible on what tools you use to make this assessment.
Well, I guess, and I'll just leave it at that. If there's any documents, I guess, that you can table with this committee in terms of the provinces were asking for a map to be used during the driest time of the year, which was June. The federal government came back saying you're going to be using this map from later in August, which was significant difference in moisture. And in August is too late. So I would just encourage you to make sure that the maps that the federal government is using are actually accurate and are the time that was most in need. But Mr. Kuchar, Dr. Kuchar, thank you very much for coming. We haven't had a chance to have you at committee in a while. My colleague, Mr. McDonald, had mentioned in his questions to the minister about the PEI potato wart issue. It's been more than 2 years since the ban on the export of PEI seed potatoes. I think to say there's some frustration with CFIA in this issue would be an understatement. I would just really appreciate an update from you. There was an international review committee that was appointed by the Liberal government last year that came out with their report saying there is no risk of potato wart in the seed potato industry in PEI, and yet the ministerial order is still in place. Can you give us an update? I understand CFIA is meeting with the potato board later this month or in December. Can you give us an update on what the situation is?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And specifically on the potato wart thing, I want to start by saying that the situation is warranting us to make sure that there are controls in place. But I do want to start by saying 95% of the potatoes from PEI are moving. So there is a small segment, and specifically the seed potatoes, which are a concern, and we are working on that one. As you asked, member, what are we doing onto that one? So let me assure you, one, we are putting in place with an understanding of United States, the pest-free places of production. We're also putting together a risk management plan, and we are working with the PEI Potato Board and the Canadian Potato Council. And this is an inclusive process so that we can actually design a program which has a surveillance activity, the surveillance which proves that there is absence of potato wart in particular fields, and we can then restore that activity which we can. It's a very scientific process, Chair, and we are following the international norms on that.
Thanks. And I guess I just will conclude with this. The minister said this is a little annoyance, and you said, well, 97% of the potatoes are moving, but the producers who are growing seed potato, and that's their entire livelihood and their industry, it's not a little annoyance, and it's not a little issue. It is a significant issue. It's a multi-million-dollar business in PEI. So I would just encourage you in your dealing with this, you understand the impact this is having on PEI potato farmers. This isn't a little annoyance. This is a huge issue for those producers. But thank you for the update.
Thank you.
We'll turn to Mr. Carr for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just start by addressing the fact that there's no doubt that climate change is real, and that we've seen clearly laid out in testimony today and from witnesses and reports previously the impact that that's having on the agriculture, agri-food industry in particular. I was just looking at the forecast for my hometown of Winnipeg, and it is going to be December next week. And this is what the temperature will be in Winnipeg: -2, -3, -2, -1, -2, -3, and 0 degrees in the first week of December in Winnipeg. Now, I was taking a look at a couple of different reports. As you may know, I'm a new member of the Agriculture Committee, so I'm getting caught up on things. And my Conservative colleagues like to talk often about blaming the price on pollution for the entirety of inflation, particularly around food prices. So I just wanted to read a couple of things, and one was from a report called Canada's Food Price Report 2023. This was put together by the University of Dalhousie, University of British Columbia, Guelph, and the University of Saskatchewan. And one of the key authors of this report is someone that my colleagues like to quote often. That's Monsieur Charlebois. Well, on the bottom of page 15, I just simply wanted to take a moment to reference the following. There is no one individual factor that can be specifically identified as the root cause of increases in food prices. Various macroeconomic factors like those identified, labor shortages, continued adverse climate events, geopolitical conflicts, all contribute to changes that we see in food prices. Furthermore, during a study called the Grocery Affordability Examining the Rising Food Costs in Canada that this committee undertook prior to me taking my seat here, one of many witnesses mentioned that, and I quote, "There was not a single quarter since Q2 of 2020 when the Canadian food price inflation has been higher than in the United States." Furthermore, I will note on the next page that there is a graph that shows not only is Canada below the G7 average in terms of a rise in grocery prices, but that Canada is essentially on par with the United States. Now, there is not a price on pollution in United States jurisdictions. How can it be then that if food prices are relatively similar in Canada and in the United States, one where there is a price on pollution, one where there is not, that the price on pollution can be attributed to the increase in food prices? So my question for the Deputy Minister is, can she please talk to us a little bit about the way in which climate change is affecting the industry and the ways in which she believes the industry, with the support of the Government of Canada, will need to adapt to what is clearly a very changing environment? Thank you.
That's a very broad question, Mr. Chair, and probably Tom has more to add, Mr. Rosser, but what it does point to, though, is the multiple factors involved in pricing food, which I think this committee is very well aware of. And what we do in my department is analyze pretty much step by step, what is it that we can do, where do we have the tools that can make a difference, and that can be from the science, starting at the very beginning on how can we adapt our seed production to what is going to be necessary in the future with very mild winters and perhaps not enough irrigation to start off the season, and then a very hot season and perhaps wildfires as well. What does that mean for the supports that farmers will need in terms of agri-recovery that we've been talking about, but perhaps more importantly, prevention in advance, so insurance that they're putting in place, but better soil health, better practices to manage the tilling and the fertilizing and crop protection, all of the different stages involved. And then once beyond the farm gate, the challenges to the supply chain, and what does that mean for pricing as well. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Rosser to add.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have very little to add in response other than to note, I mean, certainly there are multiple factors that affect food affordability. Certainly climate events, not only in this country but worldwide, can affect commodity prices. I might add that Russia's invasion of the Ukraine last year led to spikes globally in grain prices, feed prices, fertilizer prices. We have seen those prices start to moderate, and as a consequence, we are seeing an easing of many price indicators here in Canada.
Well, it's very interesting, Mr. Rosser, that you mentioned the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I recognize that this may be out of the scope of the work that you're undertaking in agriculture, agri-food. However, as you will note, there was recently a very important introduction of a new Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement. Is there anything you can speak to in that agreement that would assist in lowering food prices globally or assist in any type of agricultural production in Ukraine that may see an offset benefit to Canada as a result?
I would say anything that increases the flow, the export of food from Ukraine is going to help with global food prices. In particular, of course, we've seen the impact on the lack of grain shipments and the limited shipments going particularly to the most needy countries, and what that has meant in terms of global grain prices and therefore driving up the price of bread, for instance. So anything that will facilitate more trade with Ukraine will make a difference.
We'll leave it at there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Thank you to the officials. Maintenant, Monsieur Parent, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm getting to know some of you. Seems like you like being here. I'd like to follow up on the questions that I had for the minister earlier. I know that you can't talk about the political aspect, but I did talk about produce farmers. Quebec allocated extra funds without interest to get liquid assets to, or cash assets to the businesses. I gave an example earlier. And so I was really talking about the subject that is relevant today. Do you have any discussions about the federal government helping Quebec. I'm talking about additional funds for farmers and producers. The brief answer is no, not right now. What we are doing is we are working closely with the Quebec government, with our counterparts, to see what we can do to provide help to those who need it, but earlier on in the process, because agri-recovery is not made for that. Usually people need, when they need a quick short-term help, they need to go towards insurance programs or the advanced payment program. We want to, and that will make a difference for them very quickly. But with regards to recovery, we need to wait until the end of the season to assess how we will proceed. Thank you, Ms. Beck. I'm aware of that, and that's why I'm asking you the question separately. So you heard my message today. If there's anything that you can do internally, that would be great because we need help. With reference to the insurance program, more than half of the businesses don't participate because it doesn't work for them. They would be paying more than what they will get back. So I don't want to get into that too much. With regards to recovery, that is a program for the end of the season. The minister said earlier, yes, as soon as possible. What kind of wait times can people expect? Sure, we can wait till the end of the season, but farmers need to prepare their next season. If we don't show up for them, they will end up doing something else with their lands. It takes a few weeks once we've received the documents from whichever province, be it Saskatchewan or Quebec. Sometimes the last time I looked, we hadn't received everything from Quebec, but we've started working with what we already have. If it's not too complicated, it could be a few weeks. We've already had these kinds of issues with other provinces, so I think it should be before Christmas as everything goes smoothly. Thank you for your clear and concise answer. Very appreciated. I asked about the local infrastructure agricultural funds earlier to the minister. It is not great that these companies are working on requests, and then before they even submit, they're told that the amount of money that they will get is only going to be $50,000, even for remote regions. I go on the website and just to see what's going on, and it still says that you can submit a request for up to $120,000, but something is not working out here. People have other things to do than fill out paperwork. Do you have any discussions in order to add funds to this program? We've only had $10 million more this year, and so it was allocated very quickly. We had requests for up to $60 million of funds, and this program is one that people are interested in. We, of course, allocated the smaller funds, or $15,000, just to make sure that more people would get the funds. But indeed, it does take time to see where we can send the money. And $10 million, that goes very fast. So I understand that there was an announcement, but there was not much more money. Maybe you can answer the following question. Agri-Food is always underfunded. Yesterday at the House of Commons, the Conservatives brought up a report that we adopted 2 years ago here. We talked about investing in the modernization and upgrades in the industry. There was a reference to Vallée Jonction. Where are you at? Can you tell us if there's going to be more funds allocated and support from the federal government? 30 seconds, please. So, quickly, thank you for the question. Yes, we have made efforts to encourage investment in the processing plants sector. We have programs to provide support when there are innovative technologies involved. The minister mentioned this morning that across the country there are new investments in the sector. There are targeted programs that can help with regards to investments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome back to the committee, everyone. Glad to have you here. Deputy Minister, last week I met with a group of young farmers who came to talk to me specifically about the extremely high cost of land. And, you know, my riding's on Vancouver Island. It's a very desirable place to live. So we sometimes have price stabilization, but the price of land always just seems to be going up and up. And you know, they really identified the fact that, you know, so many farmers are land rich and cash poor. There's a very real problem with the intergenerational transfer of that land, and often, you know, a farmer who's been working on that land, in order to retire appropriately, they have to sell at a high price because all of their assets are locked into the land. And so this presents a real problem. And you know, I fly with Air Canada a lot, going back and forth, and always on Air Canada, there are these advertisements for an investment firm, like invest in farmland. So increasingly, a lot of farmland is being seen as a commodity, as an investment vehicle. And it's a vehicle for people to make money, but we're forgetting, I think, the primary purpose, which is to feed local communities. And so I'm just wondering, I understand this is a cross-jurisdictional issue, and often municipalities and provinces have to take the lead. But just the very fact that this is a pan-Canadian problem, and I think what the young farmers were telling me, they said, look, this is a problem that is present in many different provinces. So they asked me, you know, what roles can the federal government, and specifically AAFC, what can you do in working with your provincial counterparts to address this problem? So I'll pose that question to you.
Thanks. As a matter of fact, I met with our own advisory youth council just yesterday. So hearing directly from them and others, exact same issue that you raise. I guess the best thing that we can do is ensure, for instance, on issues like intergenerational transfer, that our colleagues at Finance Canada, for instance, who are ensuring that tax law reflects the challenges that we're all seeing, and we're always optimistic that that will result in a better outcome for young farmers. Anything that we can do in our conversations with the provinces, and I met this week with the deputy ministers of all of the provinces and territories, issues facing the new generation of farmers that need to come on board are something of great concern to all of us. And I can tell you with certainty that they are equally concerned about ensuring better access, especially given the incredible costs these days that we're seeing. British Columbia is probably the worst, though.
Thank you, because you know that's a very real threat to our future food security as a nation. Just switching gears here, and it's in line with what my colleague Ms. Rood asked the minister during the first hour. You know, I was on a panel with the Canadian Produce Marketing Association last week, and of course, one of their big issues is the regulations coming from ECCC. Your department is in receipt of a letter from President Ron Lemaire, dated October the 19th. At the end of that letter, he had 4 recommendations. And look, I live in a coastal community. I understand the dangers of plastic pollution. Our marine environment is especially at risk, and we know of bioaccumulation of microplastics. You know, every time I go and catch salmon off our beautiful west coast, I know there's a good chance that there's a high degree of microplastics within the seafood that I'm catching, and that's a very real threat. That being said, you know, the CPMA and the fresh fruit and vegetable growers have identified some very real concerns with this, and I think, like, there's a good intention here, but maybe unintended consequences. So, you know, technically, can you explain to this committee, in the conversations you have with your ECCC counterpart, how are you trying to address their specific asks? Because, you know, if we're hearing threats from U.S. producers saying we're not going to export to Canada because we can't deal with the regulatory burden. And the fact that there's a very real danger of increased food waste, a danger to safe food handling. How are you specifically addressing those concerns?
And we share those concerns, and of course meet regularly with Mr. Lemare and his colleagues as well. And I'd say I'm in pretty constant contact with our colleagues at ECCC to outline exactly what you've said, and at the same time to outline what we would recommend as not solutions, but at least ways of easing possible implications and, as you say, unintended consequences. We've been very clear about what that means for not only food safety, but for food waste, which is already at appalling numbers in Canada at over $50 billion a year. So something like that, very important.
May I ask what those are specifically? How are you addressing his key asks?
So for instance, plastics that will have to come into direct contact with food. So beef would be one of those products, but also fruits and vegetables. And what are the alternatives? And how long is it going to take for us to get there? And how can we, because I don't obviously have control over everything, but what is it that we can do to support the industries that are coming up with compostable plastics that will make a difference? And at the same time, speaking with other countries who, while we may be in the lead at this point in time on plastics, although I gather some of that's under review right now, pretty soon the Americans and others will come on board too. We're not going to be out in front all alone for a very long time.
Do you have a guarantee from the Americans, like California in particular, that this is not going to endanger their exports to Canada?
I would not say that.
You don't have a guarantee yet. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Deputy Minister. We're now going to turn to Mr. Steinley for up to 5 minutes.
I just want to pick up on something Mr. Carr said, and Mr. Rosser finished it. The invasion of Ukraine led to food prices, but also this government put on a tariff on fertilizer that led to fertilizer taking $33.5 million out of the pockets of farmers as well. Is that fair, Mr. Rosser?
Yes, it is correct that there was some tariffs applied to the import of fertilizer from Russia last year.
$33.5 million was collected by this government. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate that, just to get that on the record. Dr. Culture, I do have a question, and it's kind of been a pet peeve of mine for a while now, is around SRM and the fact that we do have a lot more, I wouldn't say it's more difficult for processors in Canada. They do take up more of that SRM, and that has to be disposed of, which does add costs. Have we looked at maybe going back to pre-2004 SRM standards? I know that we do have negligible risk status now with the WHO. And would that affect our status? And we do have a processing issue in Canada, and it has been very much shrunk to a few major players. Would that help in promoting more processing capacity if we did take a look at that? And is that on the books for CFIA to maybe loosen some of those regulations around SRM?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So let me start by saying this, that our system, as it explains the specified risk material, the SRM, it is actually a control measure to make sure that the international trading partners actually have confidence in the beef which we produce, that it does not in any way, shape, or form transmit BSE. So we put that in place as a feed ban and other aspects after we detected BSE in Canada in 2003. The conversation which we have, Mr. Chair, is that at this point, the surveillance of the BSE program has given us the negligible risk status, which is from controlled. Will it vary with our SRM kind of a movement or controls? International partners actually look at that rather than the negligible risk status. We won't lose a negligible risk status unless we find another BSE case onto that.
So do you think that is a bit of a barrier, because there is actually across Western Canada only one company that disposes of the SRM materials, and they kind of do set the price, and they can really controls that market. So one of the issues that we do have with getting more processors into our country is maybe some of that red tape that they have to cut through. Are we looking at making that easier for processors to dispose of SRM and make it more attractive to get some more processing in Canada?
So again, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would put it in, just to answer you in a more precise form, I'll put it in two ways. One is that if we are looking at harmonizing, for example, for U.S., if we are actually looking to do that, we will need to fundamentally change the way we actually use our feed mills and our processing of the plants.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I just got a minute and a half left. I do have one more question. During COVID, we allowed provincially regulated meat processing to be sold across the country to allow for the supply chain to be more able to be flexible. That worked out well, and there was no issues. Could we see some of those inspections be moving forward, a provincially inspected processing facility, abattoir, be able to sell across the country? Because it worked during COVID, so I'm wondering if that would help, because that would loosening some of those interprovincial trade barriers would be beneficial to all of our processors.
So, Mr. Chair, what I would say is that there wasn't a wholesale movement of meat. There was a pilot which was conducted across Saskatchewan and Alberta, and it has been a very successful pilot. We're looking at opportunities in remote areas where there aren't any meat processing facilities, which are crossing the two borders or across the two borders of two provinces, and we are working towards looking at if we can have more of that capacity, and which would be another way of looking at it more like an interprovincial pilot.
So during that pilot project, there was no issues, right?
Mr. Steinle.
Right now, at this point, we are actually using it as a pilot, and we haven't figured out anything specific on that.
Lloydminster, I think, is what you're referencing, Mr. Steinle. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We now have Mr. Drouin, 5 minutes.
You, Mr. Chair, and obviously thank you to the department for being before this committee. I just want to raise a few points that have been said at this committee, and I understand that there's been goals that have been made on plastics, and I know for a fact that no decisions have been made. There's been objectives set out, and I want to confirm that I do believe that somewhere we can balance the need to protect our fish stocks or commercial fisheries, can continue on fishing, and can continue feeding our Canadians, because we know microplastics are killing marine life, and we do understand the need to protect food waste by using products such as plastics. I also want to confirm that there's been many cases where governments have moved forward on CG1 and have pulled back because they've heard some comments from industry. But I just wanted to inform my other side of this particular process. But I do want to chat about agri-recovery, because it's been raised on multiple occasions, que ce soit M. Perron avec Agri-Relance. Sometimes we get the impression that because the province sends a letter that automatically it's approved, and I do want to confirm that when the province wants to trigger agri-recovery, who does the analysis for this? Is it just a yay or nay from the federal government, or does it involve other partners such as the provincial governments?
Thank you for the question, because of course it's never as simple as it seems. And in fact, the first letter that the province sends is a heads up. It says we're going to do this. And in fact, many weeks can happen between that letter and when the province follows up with all of the details. So that's part of the issue. And then they obviously have the analysis by then in hand, usually because the event is over. And we produce what we have as well. And we have discussions with the province and the officials on exactly what it is. So we have sort of an agreed statement of facts, if you will. And then each of us have our own processes to go through our own systems to get access to the funding. Because, of course, this is a cost-shared agreement. So that's partly why it takes a long time. But also, it was not designed to be quick. And I really want to make that clear. It's not, agri-recovery was never designed to be quick, and that was a joint design, right? It wasn't feds imposing on provinces or territories. So we, as as a community, with my deputy minister colleagues from all the provinces and territories, are actually just starting to, right now, create a working group to look at exactly how that works, because it's not satisfactory for anybody, frankly, and it's highly frustrating for both sides of the table.
And when you say it's cost shared, what's the split between the feds and the provinces?
That's the 60-40.
60-40, okay. And the
60 for the federal government, just to be clear.
Right. And Agri-Recovery acts like a last chance insurance, essentially, because no other programs are able to respond to the needs of farmers currently on the ground. And what would be I'm assuming you're having these conversations, but I know even when you're dealing with private insurance, sometimes it can take up to a year to settle. And the analysis that is done from both the province and the federal government in terms of the needs. So if we go too quick and we forget certain needs that are on the ground that we haven't met, how do you balance a quick response, which is never quick enough for farmers that are going through a crisis, with the need to ensure that you're responding to the true needs of all farmers that are going through this crisis?
So it would be a mix of programs, and in fact what we saw on the East Coast was that the Federal Emergency Act, DFAA, was actually the one that was ultimately most used, because that was deemed to be faster and, frankly, provided a greater coverage. That was 90% of costs incurred, so that was the default, if you will. And then Agri-Recovery stepped in afterwards. Some of the ways they can make sure that more farmers are included are extending the date for applications, and that's what happened in the West with the most recent Agri-Recovery set of programs that we issued. Farmers can apply, for instance, for relief up until the end of the fiscal year. So that gives them a long time to be able to understand, for instance, that they don't have enough feed for the winter because there was too much drought in the summer, and they still have time to go and buy replacement feed for their animals. And that's good until March. So that's an example of what's negotiated, where there's flexibility in the conversation with the provinces.
Right, and now we've had droughts in Alberta, Saskatchewan. Over many years, we've had floods in BC, fires in BC. We've had a hurricane out east. We're dealing with too much rain in Quebec right now for le secteur maraîcher. Our public servants, I'm assuming the team is getting really good at doing this. Unfortunately,
we're at time, Mr. Joanne, but Deputy Minister, I guess you can answer that probably relatively quickly.
Well, I'm going to say yes, we are.
We've got 2.5 minutes. Monsieur Perron, s'il vous plaît.
Merci. Mr. Perron for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to specify that I'm aware that the Agri-Recovery program is a last resort program. That's why I talked about a specific different program like the one that Quebec created. I did have the answer from the minister and through you that it's not in the plans right now. But the minister did say that he's always asking for more money, and so I hope that that we will continue to work in the same direction. You mentioned that there will be a working group for Agri-Recovery. That is what that the producers asked for. When more than half of the producers don't use a program, it means that the program is inadequate. I'm aware how this working group works. For example, they renew terms after 5 years, but we have to start working on it now. What will be involved? Is it just on agri-recovery or climate change and other risk management issues? It will be with it will be looking at all of the programs, but especially agri-recovery, and all territories and provinces will be involved. I imagine that sectors, stakeholders will be involved as well. Have you begun anything? What's the calendar like? This group has worked since the beginning of the Sustainable Agriculture program, but we did receive some guidelines this week, or we sent them guidelines asking them to respond within a few months with their assessment and what they want us to do. I don't know how much we will be able to change within the actual framework, for this partnership, but we'll see what's possible. And they will definitely be consulting those involved. We discussed plastics earlier. Of course, we all agree that they should be eliminated, but are there possible substitutes? You mentioned earlier that there was an investment. I'd like to hear more on that. It doesn't come from us, but I know that there is innovation within Canadian companies who are in research and they're at the research and development stage, very small scale. We hope to work with them, but it's going very slowly.
Mr.
McGregor, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Deputy Minister, the Grain Act review, a perennial question from me. When former Minister Mary-Claude Bibeau was before the committee in May, I asked her about this, and she did say that she was hoping to have an update or table the results of the review before Christmas. Tomorrow is December 1st. Grain Act, of course, if there's going to be any legislative review, that is, of course, of very real interest to the legislators of the House of Commons. It's been a number of months. Can you provide us with an update of where we're at, what the department's hoping to do? It's been a long time that we've been waiting for a substantive update on this file.
In fact, I believe it's years
Yes,
in total,
it is.
my understanding. Well, as a department, we're doing everything we can to make sure the minister is ready to table whenever circumstances permit. Lots of consultations have been done, lots of reflection on what recommendations we should be putting in a new act. So I'm with the minister, the former minister, on we live in hope.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question I had was, I've had the pleasure of touring the Summerland Research Center twice now, and it's fantastic to see the dedication of AAFC employees. But I know that in Budget 23, there was some funding to restore the aging research facilities that are in urgent need of repair. Can you just quickly, in the 45 seconds that I have, just give an overview of, what is the general state of research centers? What are you expecting in terms of cost? Is there any danger in terms of laboratory safety and so on? Because I know they deal with a lot of very harmful pathogens and so on.
Oh, you're good. Mr. Chair, I really want our ADM corporate to answer because she came all this way and this is what she is good at.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. And we were really pleased in Budget 2023 to get the $116 million to support the recapitalization of our all infrastructure across the country. When we talk about the gap, there's still a remaining gap to maintain. We have over than 2,000 buildings across the country, and I would say we're still looking and working with central agency to first to table what is our long-term capital plan for AAFC, and just to make sure that we are maintaining our infrastructure to do what we're good in, good science.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the Tories for 4 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. We've each got one question here, so I'll try and be quick. But in this year's departmental plan, it shows a downward trend and certainly failing Canadian agriculture when it comes to resolving trade issues. Certainly when we see what's happening with beef and pork in Canada and the United Kingdom, for example, India. Can you table with the committee the metrics used to arrive at this year's 80% success rate? Is that possible? Just a yes or no. I'm going to try and move quick.
We can table the report.
Thank you. Can you also table with the committee a list of tariff and non-tariff trade barriers Canada is facing with other countries, specifically on agriculture goods?
That would take much longer, but we could come up with something.
Thank you. I'll just pass it on to Mr. Lehoux.
Merci, merci, Monsieur le Président.
My question is for the CFIA. I want to ask a question about vaccines. We know that there's a vaccine bank. There are 250,000 doses right now. There are assessments made by the agency that demonstrate that we would need 2.5 million doses. So we are not even at 10% now. There was an increase announced in the previous budget 8 months ago. Where are we at right now? There have been no calls to tender to start working on the development of this vaccine. So, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. Thank you for the question.
I'll begin by saying that there has been a lot of progress on the foot and mouth disease vaccine bank. We have actually gone forward and have actually requested information. Request for information is out for who is capable of actually providing those vaccines to Canada in the quantity that we need. And that is in progress at this point. We have a $57.5 million investment. We have a plan in place by which we will identify who can supply us, and we'll establish that bank.
I will pass the mic to Ms. Rood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question for Ms. Beck. Ms. Beck, you stated earlier that the U.S. is on board with the P2 plastics ban with Canada, and I'm just wondering who it was you spoke with in the U.S. Like, was it Greenpeace? Was it the government? Because according to the Prime Minister, the produce growers that were at the meeting at the roundtable with the Prime Minister, there is not consensus from the U.S. on this. I'm just wondering if you could tell us where you're hearing that from.
I don't believe I said that they were on board. I said that we are in consultation with the U.S. on what this means, and we're well aware and hearing from companies in the U.S. as well what that implies for them.
Well, Ms. Beck, you did say on the record that you didn't think that it would impact trade with the U.S., and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Canada, in the fruit and vegetable industry, only has 2.9% of all plastic waste, and when we import 2/3 of our produce from the U.S., I'm not sure where the rationale is where you think that that's not going to impact trade when the U.S. has already said they're not going to send stuff to Canada. So has the department done a study on what this impact of this plastics ban will be on the produce industry and on the food security of Canadians?
No, we have not done such a study.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll let the 20 seconds come back to the chair. No, Mr. Steinle, don't. That's okay. I want to take a chance at our good officials. Ms. Beck, I want to start with Bill 359. This was a private member's bill that I introduced that would amend the Seeds, Feeds, and Pest Controls Act to try to allow for foreign decisions of trusted jurisdiction. Now, we leave that definition open for the agencies themselves to delineate who would be a trusted organization, but it's a reflection from what I heard over the past 4 years as a member of Parliament from the Canadian agriculture industry that says we want to make sure we have access to the same tools that our competitors have in other jurisdictions around the world, particularly where there's already been scientific review of that would be robust, similar to our own Canadian agencies. Has the department taken a look at the proposed legislation, and do you have any opinion or any thoughts initially that you could share with me or this committee?
And my colleague, Dr. Kochar might add, I will say we have certainly had a look at it. I wouldn't say it was anything intensive until that there is more movement on it and we actually need to dive more deeply into it. It's a very interesting idea, and we will certainly be doing consultations when it gets to that stage.
Well, then, anything from you, Mr. Kochar, on that?
So only thing which will add, Mr. Chair, is that we, in fact, are already in the process of seed modernization and feed modernization also, which will capture a few of those components.
Do you think, Mr. Kochar, that you'll be able to gazette the feed regulations? This has been something, of course, the ability to take international decisions to help inform our own process. I know that work has been ongoing for quite some time. I had a conversation with the President of the Treasury Board recently about the idea of having that gazetted before Christmas. Do you think that's possible, or could you give this committee an update on an expected timeline of when those regulations can be gazetted?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the updates to the feed regulations are planned for publication in winter of 2024. I think that is the timeline I have. And those are the things which we are expecting that we will be able to meet that timeline as we go through our process as such.
Deputy Minister, we talk a lot about PMRA at this committee, given its importance to agriculture writ large. But one agency that perhaps is not talked about enough is PMC, which is the Pest Management Center for smaller application products, really important in the horticulture and fruit growing sector. I recognize that you're not the Deputy Minister of Finance and that budgetary decisions are of the government and certainly my colleagues. But can you speak to any work or any recognition from the department of what could be done to improve that process? Because we hear a lot from fruit growers and horticulture producers, particularly of the fact that there hasn't been an increase in funding in that agency and the concern that there is delay in getting those types of applications through that do have a lot of impact on farmers.
I completely agree that it's an extremely important program, and in fact one that I visited just last week to see how things were going. We also are concerned that there is not enough resources being placed in that particular program and are looking internally at what we can do in the event that we don't get any new money.
Just two quick ones. Wine sector support program. Mr. Parent mentioned about this. I take notice that that is a funding decision, again, outside your direct purview, but your agency, your department, has been, I believe, the one that has actually delivered the two-year program, which will be coming to an end. And I know, again, I'm not asking you to opine on whether or not we're going to get new money, because that's outside your purview, perhaps. But I'm wondering about the implementation of the program, the feedback from wine producers across the country. Seemingly, from where I sit, it's been good. I'd be interested to hear your perspective. And I'd be interested to hear if you're hearing any resistance from other countries. We talked about how the 100% excise exemption obviously ran into issues from a trade perspective. Any conversations from other countries that are coming across your desk about concerns, because it actually mirrors a very similar type of support program that exists in other jurisdictions? Any concerns and any feedback from the wine producers themselves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be very brief in my response. Yes, we're in very active dialogue with a representative of the wine sector. The feedback we've had on the wine sector support program to date has been very positive. We have in our dialogue with them, we've talked about a way forward in further enabling their transition. In terms of, and we do, there are dedicated groups within the World Trade Organization, among other bodies, that talk about policy in the alcoholic beverages sector and so on. But I am not aware of extensive dialogue or concerns being expressed by trade partners in relation to that program.
Last thing before my colleagues might challenge the chair if I use too much time is Deputy Minister Beck, being a Nova Scotia Member of Parliament, when I look at our livestock industry, particularly in the cattle, it's not nearly the size or scope in Western Canada or even Ontario or Quebec, but it still is important, and it is the last region in the country that doesn't have specific programming such as a livestock insurance in the Maritimes. Wondering if this has been something your Deputy Minister Loretta Robichaud has raised at all, and what the prospects might be for an extension of the existing programs across the country.
And I know you don't have much time, and short answer is yes, we're looking into that.
Wonderful. Okay, colleagues, thank you for the indulgence. I sometimes get jealous of getting you guys to ask the questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to engage. I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to move all the votes together on supplements, so seeing no issue on that. Shall the votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food carry? I assume on division? On division, great. Colleagues, first of all, thank you to our officials. I have to move quickly, so I won't name you all, but thank you for the work that you do in the name of Canadian agriculture. Colleagues, just quickly, on Monday, to give you a sense of where we're going, we'll have Michael Medline from Empire, from Sobeys Group, for the first hour. And the second hour, we have Food and Health Consumer Products of Canada, Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers, and Food and Beverage Canada. So that is what we're doing on Monday as we turn to the grocer study. I wish you all a great weekend. Meeting adjourned.